and they flew me up in a helicopter, and I was supposed to wear the goggles the whole way, but I kind of peeked. I kind of shifted around, like you do one of these things. So I actually got a look at it from the air. For those stationed at Groom or commuting there daily, the flight schedules are posted for classified flights. Everyone not cleared for that particular program or flight has to be indoors, and there are no windows where you can see out on the flight line or into other hangars. You have to be off the flight line and inside 30 minutes prior to any classified flight. As you know, a couple of thousand personnel are flown into Groom and Papoose and other facilities that they've now moved further south every day from McCarran Airport and Las Vegas and Edwards Air Force Base. Many people drive in from Tonopah that live north of the range. Other people commute through Mercury and Indian Springs from Las Vegas. While at Groom, I made contacts. Later met them again at Nellis Air Force Base or around Las Vegas over time and became friends with them and stayed friends for many, many years. On my third day of the job at Groom, I had to remove a module from a multi-bay piece of satellite communications equipment used to support special mission aircraft. I noticed while inside this bay checking out the wiring, I contained a steel unit about the size of a large briefcase. I noticed it had a National Security Agency ID plate on it. The nomenclature on the nameplate was Direct Orbital Communications Link, which I thought was strange as the unit was part of a digital communications link used solely to communicate with classified Air Force vehicles. I was unaware at the time of any military orbital missions not directly related to NASA. Remember that I'm talking about the late 70s. The space shuttle didn't fly until 1981. I disconnected the unit out of curiosity and removed the rear access cover. To my amazement, there were some half dozen large-scale integrated circuit chips with over 500 pins. The inspection stamp was 1975, so you have to visualize what we have today going back to 1975 when, did we even have TRS-80s then? It was about the size of a Zippo lighter. I believe the most advanced processor speeds the NSA had at the time were equivalent to IBM 8088 running about 4 million cycles per second. There was for any of y'all familiar with technology, this processor ran at 1 billion cycles per second, which is about 4 million, a billion, 250 times greater. Yeah, I think that's about right. I haven't figured this out. But the reason I knew it, the clock speed was 1 billion cycles per second. There was a clock synchronization jack on the back of this unit, a BNC connector, which was labeled. And I had a frequency counter, and I actually measured it. And I couldn't even working on black programs at the time, I couldn't imagine something that ran at 4 billion cycles per second when they didn't even have an Apple II Plus with 48K memory out there. And we had these clunker IBMs that were like 4 bays that only ran at 4 million cycles per second. Yet we had this one circuit card with modules on it. It's incredible if you know even the slightest bit about technology. In the Groom mess hall, I heard words like Lorentz forces, pulse detonation, cyclotron radiation, quantum flux transduction field generators, quasi-crystal energy lenses, and EPR quantum receivers. I'm not going to talk about quasi-crystals. I want to make a prediction. Quasi-crystals is the key to everything you wanted to ever know about how they got here. And that's all I'm going to say about it now. Except one of the quasi-crystals is the hydrogen crystal. I wrote down everything I saw, heard, and touched in my log every night. But as you would expect, the food was great, but it had to be. There was no cable, no alcohol, and no women. So everybody got fat. Later back at the base, my routine went the same, and I also had a part-time job at the Silver Dollar Saloon and Casino that Bill Ladd owned up until a few years ago and may still. I ran their security for him. I had this NSA friend, Gerald, that I mentioned previously. You may have forgot. He's the one that watched the people with highly classified jobs at the Nellis Range, the Nevada test site, and other areas around the Southwest. He was in a supervisor position. It was way up in the NSA. But he liked the field jobs. He didn't like staying up around Fort Meade or any of the other places those guys in three-piece suits hang out. But his primary job was watching the people at Groom and the Nevada test site, where at the time they were still doing underground atomic tests, exploding bombs. He happened to mention a vehicle that was boosted into orbit and returned to land in the Nevada desert. It was an unmanned reconnaissance vehicle that took off from a B-52 bomber and used booster rockets to place it in temporary Earth orbit, low Earth orbit, for the purpose of taking reconnaissance pictures. I really thought he was feeding me a lot of bull at the time. And he said, this vehicle is remotely piloted and communications are made via the docile system at Groom. I'm not usually too slow, but it didn't hit me until he repeated, direct orbital communications link, DOCL. Bingo, the light bulb went on. I had seen a piece of the docile equipment at Groom, the one with the large chips in it. These are old pictures of the virtual reality lab at Brooks Air Force Base, where they developed the software to fly these classified, and by the way, they call them IPVs, independently piloted vehicles, not UAVs or RPVs on the black programs. After I agreed to, has there only been one of these showed? Okay. There. After I agreed with my friends to write the story, there was a lot of discussion on who would stick their neck out. I don't know what that tells you about me. But they were, long after we were researching this book, they stayed with the defense industry, and I got out. So I was the only one directly tied to them, so it fell on my shoulders. I talked to several military judge advocate general lawyers, or JAGs. I actually did. I actually made appointments with them. And I told them I'd worked many classified programs and I wanted to write a fiction story that is technology-based. I was told I couldn't name any real individuals with real clearances or covers or their working names, and I haven't. I was also told I couldn't discuss any details or technology of secret programs I had been personally assigned to, which I haven't done. Then I was told as long as I did that, I could damn well write what I wanted to, and I have. Of course, I didn't tell them I was going to write about the government conspiracy to cover up UFO contact and reverse engineering of government, reverse engineering of alien technology, or that I was interviewing SR-71, U-2, TR-1, and the SR-75 pilots that I made contacts with over the years and had flown classified aircraft. But I didn't think that was important at the time to tell them. You don't think that was important? But you give the government too much information, they just screw it up. In the summer of 1992, the five friends and I, there were six. See, when I run out of five fingers, I just get confused. I had completed my notes from our first meeting interviews. On my last trip to Nevada in 1994, without benefit of my friends, I wanted to use some information from some other retired military friends and cross-check my facts. Everything I've written about in alien rapture, I've got from at least two sources. I have a lot of stuff that I haven't written about, and I probably won't, that I couldn't verify. And every one of these sources, I either knew directly for 20 or 30 years who'd worked black programs, or only talked to their closest friends that they'd also known for many years. We did not talk to one person that somebody hadn't known for at least 15 years. We didn't want any strangers appearing with information. We only trusted our closest friends. Bud, one of my co-conspirators, had informed me he had a cancerous tumor and was going through some serious depression. He died 30 days. It was just incredible. He found out on a Thursday that he was having numbness and dizziness. Went to the doctor, found out 3 days later he had a cancerous tumor, and 29 and a half days actually later, I talked to him the night before he died. He was gone. So this was a blow to all of us. He was our guru. The remaining three friends, Sal has dropped from the face of the earth. It's hard to define paranoia in a group of six people like we were at the time doing what we were trying to do. But Sal was the most paranoid, and he's called us up a little over 2 years ago and said, I don't know if you're going to hear from me again, because we actually had a publisher and were convinced we may have a chance of getting this out before the government set on it. So he just freaked out. He's like to imagine that he's like on some island in the Pacific drinking Mai Tais or something, I hope. Let me talk about my friend Doc. He has a theory that UFOs seem to like fast aircraft. This SR-71 pilot, Doc, was stationed at Kadena Air Force Base, Okinawa, where the SR-71s were stationed on the SAC side of the base back in 1973. In fact, I think they still are. I was there last time in '81. While flying back across the South China Sea from a reconnaissance mission, he encountered a shadow over his cockpit. Doc said his avionics systems went totally haywire and he felt the aircraft nose down slightly, which can be dangerous at 2,000 miles an hour or 35 miles per minute. When he looked up, he was so startled that he almost panicked immediately. Made evasive maneuvers to his right and down, which is one of the maneuvers they make if there's a missile detected. Doc said the object was so big that it totally blacked out the sun. His estimate was it was 250 feet to 300 feet across. It was oval in shape, but he wasn't sure of the exact shape because there was a shimmering halo of energy surrounding the vehicle. About 3 minutes later, and some thousands of feet lower, the vehicle reappeared on his left wingtip. He tried his UHF, and all he could pick up was a deep electrical hum. He abandoned his attempts, made evasive maneuvers, and for the next 10 minutes, this thing moved about his aircraft effortlessly and stayed right on top of him. Doc said and I'm going to quote him exactly, Doc said he got this sound in his head, and his words were, like a swarm of bees in my brain, which is, it's an interesting, must be an interesting sound. The aircraft would move from the left to the right wingtip of his aircraft, and it would take about 2 minutes to move back and forth. When Doc returned from his mission, it was the same routine as the earlier incident I told you about. His commander drug him down to his office the minute he opened his mouth about the incidents and gave him a direct order not to talk about it or they'd throw the book at him, and the book is the UCMJ. One of the interesting things that Doc related to me, being an SR-71 pilot and a U.S. Air Force test pilot, which is the elite in the Air Force are the test pilots. He said he didn't know one test pilot or SR-71 pilot or astronaut, and he can name most of them and give you their birthdates and their wives' names and tell you where they lived. He said he didn't know one that hadn't had some type of contact. But he also said he didn't know one that would ever come forward and be honest about their experiences for fear of retaliation from the government. You have to realize these people's pensions, which includes their livelihood, their medical coverage, their commissary and BX privileges, you know, the government controls all that, as do they mine, by the way. Doc had a friend, Dave, who was kind of a righteous kind of guy. He didn't drink or smoke, and I've met the guy. He kind of rubs you a little, but it's people that are too perfect make those imperfect people a little uncomfortable, I guess. But Dave was drinking sake and over in Okinawa with Doc, which is kind of surprising since Doc had never seen him drink before. And he explained to him that he didn't start drinking until his last reconnaissance flight over eastern Russia. When he returned, Dave was so delirious that his crew, and I don't mean flight crew, I mean support crew on the ground, had to pull him out of the aircraft. Dave didn't know when he had taken off, what had happened,